Hello. Did you know that in biblical thinking, name equals authority, but name also equals fame? So, by obscuring the name of the Creator, Satan attempts to interfere with the Creator's authority, and Satan attempts to interfere with the Creator's fame. Let me show you. Jews have replaced the name of the Creator with Adonai, and even Hashem, while Christians have replaced the Creator's name with Lord. And how about Pan, Zoti, Her, Uram, Shoda Prabhu in other languages? Can you see the confusion? Do you see the interference? Therefore, in this video series, we will focus on the original Hebrew name of the Creator, Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh. Numerous topics and arguments will be investigated and tested against authentic Hebrew manuscript evidence. Thanks to Justin, my son, who prepared these topics and who will also be presenting these topics. My name is Piet van Rensburg. Please visit us at HebrewGospels.com.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the series on Nehemiah Gordon and the pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh. This is session number 5. Why would the scribes often leave out the Cholam vowel on the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh? If the scribes really put the vowels of Adonai on the name, then why is the Cholam so often missing? You can see here the second vowel on Adonai is a Cholam. Why is it missing on the name? For instance, in the Aleppo Codex, let's read this phrase. Vayichal af Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh ba'aretz hahi. Then the anger of Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh was kindled against that land. And you can see Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh there's the schwa, there's the kametz, there's an accent, but the cholam is missing. And again at the bottom of the page, the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh and the cholam is missing. So why is it missing? We'll start with Nehemiah Gordon, see what he teaches about the missing cholam, and then we will look at the most important Masoretic manuscripts in the world to see whether it is indeed true what Nehemiah Gordon teaches or not.
And what I realized happened is the scribes were part of this tradition of not speaking God's holy name. And to prevent people from speaking the name, they left out one of the vowels.
And what happened was, you had these scribes, and they were copying letter by letter, and then they put in the vowels, and they knew they had to leave out one of the vowels to prevent people from speaking it. There was a group of movement of Karaite Jews, specifically at that time, in Eastern Persia, who, unlike all other rabbinical and Karaite Jews, said, this one particular faction said, we must speak the name. So these scribes, when they copied it, said, well, we're not going to enable them. We're going to leave out one of the vowels to prevent them from pronouncing it. But this got the scribes very nervous. And I believe this is why they decided to pull out one of those vowels. We can't have people listening to these extreme Karaites who are insisting on the pronunciation of the name over in Khorasan and then opening up their Bible and being able to speak it. Let's just not let anybody even know how to pronounce it. Let's just leave out one of the vowels. And this is what they end up doing.
Okay, so it is quite clear what Nehemiah Gordon teaches about the missing cholam. He teaches that the scribes, who did not want you to know what the name was, put the true vowels on the name, the vowels of Yehovah, and then to prevent people from speaking it, they left out the cholam vowel. That is what Nehemiah Gordon teaches. Now, as we're starting today, I just want to remind you what the scribes really did when they did not want you to pronounce that particular word in the biblical text. We'll start there on the first line with the word Yakaka Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh Bishachin Mitzrayim, and then the word that is Ketiv Karei. Now what's actually written there in the text is Uva Ophalim. Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh will smite you with boils of Egypt and with hemorrhoids. Now at some stage the Jews decided that this word Ophalim was too crude to read out loud when reading the Bible. so that they replace it with a euphemism that is still a synonym, so they're not really changing the meaning here, but they replace this word Ophalim with Techorim, and that is written there in the margin. They read this as Uva Techorim. And they did this even before the vowel points were added to the Hebrew Bible. So when the scribes came to this word and they were recording the vowel tradition, they put dummy vowels on this word in the main text. Can you see here when you compare the vowels of Ophalim with the vowels in the main text, they are not the same. The scribes did not put the true vowels on this word and leave out one of the vowels to make it unpronounceable. No, they placed dummy vowels on this word. So remember the difference between the consonants and the vowels in the Hebrew Bible. The consonants were all written down BCE, they're all part of the original Hebrew Bible. And then before the scribes even recorded the vowel tradition using vowel signs, the name was banned from being pronounced. There are numerous evidences from the early centuries before and after the Common Era that the name was banned from being pronounced. And only after the name was banned from being pronounced and replaced with the title Adonai did the scribes record the traditional vowel tradition of the Hebrew Bible. Now Nehemiah wants us to believe that these scribes put the true vowels on the name and only left out one of the vowels to make it unpronounceable. That is actually wishful thinking, because there is no example in the entire Masoretic text of a word that was banned from being pronounced in the Talmudic era on which the scribes placed the true vowels and left out one of those vowels. It's just a very, very weak hypothesis to begin with. Nevertheless, we still have the question, why is the cholam missing? Okay, so here are some references, some proofs that we discussed in session number 3 that show that the name was banned before they added the vowels to the Hebrew Bible, and these are discussed in detail in session number 3. So why is the cholam missing? Is it missing to hide the true pronunciation from us, so that we won't even know what the true name is? Or is the cholam perhaps missing to prevent a gibberish name for the Creator? Because if the scribes did place the vowels of Adonai on the name, and then we pronounce the name together with the vowels of Adonai, then obviously we're making up a new word that doesn't really exist in Hebrew, a gibberish word. Could that perhaps be the reason? Or is there perhaps something else? Is there anything else that could explain why the cholam on the name is missing that Nehemiah Gordon does not tell us about? Today we want to answer this question from the most important Hebrew Bible manuscripts. So this is the list of the 7 important Hebrew Bible manuscripts. Some people might add or take away one, but there's not much arguing about it. These are the important manuscripts for the Hebrew Old Testament. And as we go through, we will have to divide these up into different groups. You've probably already heard that in some manuscripts the cholam is usually not missing, whereas in most manuscripts the cholam is usually missing. So not all scribes had the same approach with regard to the missing cholam, or with regards to the cholam on the name. There were different scribes with different training, and but we can clearly divide these up into groups, and we'll only do so today for the important 7 manuscripts. If you have to work through all the thousands of manuscripts and fragments, you'll probably need more than 4 classes. But I'll divide these up into 4 classes. Group A includes the Leningrad Codex, the British Museum 4445, the Cairo Codex, and the Sassoon 1053 manuscript, and it's the largest group of the important Bible manuscripts. Then the Aleppo Codex is part of Group B. We'll also look at similar manuscripts. The Sassoon 507 is also called the Damascus Crown or the Damascus Pentateuch, and it's part of Group C. And the Petersburg Codex with Babylonian pointings is part of Group D. Now, as we look at this today, we'll look at many photos and screen captures of these manuscripts. And if it seems like an information overload, don't worry, because everything will be summed up in a table for you so that you can clearly see what we learn from these different groups of manuscripts with regard to the cholam on the name Yodeh Wav Heh. So we'll start with Group A, which is the largest group of important Hebrew Bible manuscripts. And we'll start with the Leningrad Codex, which is the oldest complete dated Masoretic manuscript of the Old Testament. And this is Deuteronomy 16. Shivat Yamim Tachog, then the Lamed preposition on Yodeh Wahei, and we'll get to that in the next session. Elohecha bamakom asher yivchar Yodeh Wahei. 7 days you shall keep a feast to Yodeh Wahei, your Elohim, in the place which Yodeh Wahei shall choose. And you can see here on this, in these 3 lines, the name is written 3 times with a missing cholam. So why is the cholam missing in Group A of Hebrew Bible manuscripts? Why? Here is the Cairo Codex. As part of Group 1, they followed the same tradition. So, Ko Amar Yodeh Wahei Tzevaot, thus says Yodeh Wahei of hosts. And Yodeh Wahei is here written with a missing cholam. The cholam is missing. And the same in the Sassoon Codex. Wa'ata Yodeh Wahei Magen Ba'adi Kevodi Omerim Roshi. But you, Yodeh Wahei, are a shield about me, round about me, my glory, and he who lifts up my head. And Yodeh Wahei is here written repeated times on this page with a missing cholam. Okay. So, is this cholam missing to prevent us from speaking the true name Yehovah, to hide the true pronunciation of the name from us, or is this cholam missing to prevent us from pronouncing a gibberish name? So obviously these are 2 completely opposed views. Someone is right and someone is wrong. And how can we prove this? How can we prove this in a factual way, so that we don't have to base our conclusions on an hypothesis or on wishful thinking, but we can base our conclusion on actual facts? How can we answer this question? To answer the question, why is the cholam missing on the name? Did the scribes put the vowels of Adonai on the name and leave out the cholam to prevent a gibberish name? Or did the scribes put the vowels of Yehovah on the name and leave out the cholam to hide the true pronunciation? To answer that question, we are going to look at the vowels of Elohim. Provision has been made so that we can do a factual test to see what the scribes really tried to do. So, in the phrase Adonai Yodeh Wahei, Master Yodeh Wahei, the name Yodeh Wahei is not pronounced as Adonai. So if they pronounce it as Adonai, Adonai, that's a call for attention or a call for help. For instance, Yodeh Wahei said, Avraham, Avraham. It's a call for attention to Abraham. This phrase, Adonai Yodeh Wahei, is a title of respect. So they read it as Adonai Elohim, Master God, which is again a title of respect. So now we're going to look in these manuscripts to see what did the scribes do with the vowels of Elohim. What happened when they placed the vowels of Elohim on the name? So we already covered the composite shua versus the simple shua in the previous session. Today we're looking at the cholam. So if we see that in these manuscripts the scribes wrote shua cholam chirek on the name, Yehovi, but they wouldn't write shua cholam kametz on the name Yehovah, it might hint in the direction that the vowels shua cholam kametz are special. But if we see that the scribes, when they wrote the vowels of Elohim on the name, deleted that cholam, so that now you have a shua and a chirek, but the cholam is missing, then we will know for sure that the scribes left out that cholam to prevent a gibberish name. Because everyone agrees, and even Nehemiah Gordon agrees, that the scribes sometimes put the vowels of Elohim on the name, and these are gibberish vowels. Yehovi is not the name. So if the scribes also left out the cholam with the vowels of Yehovi, we will know they did so to prevent a gibberish name. So now we have a way to test this. Let's see what the scribes did with the vowels of Elohim. And as we're starting, we should first of all make sure we know what the vowels of Elohim are in the manuscripts. The first vowel is a chatev segol, or a composite shua. The second vowel is a cholam, and the third vowel is a chirek. So the cholam is a dot above the line, the chirek is a dot beneath the line. And then that dot, together with a stripe next to it, is an accent. So clearly the second vowel of the word Elohim in Hebrew has a cholam. It's a cholam. Alright? How about the Cairo Codex of the Prophets? There you can see the word Elohim twice. And although this is not a very clear scan, you can see the cholam dot there. Elohim's second vowel is a cholam. And the same in the Sassoon Codex. There is the word Elohim, and the second vowel is a cholam, and next to it is a levia, an accent. So clearly in Group A of Hebrew Bible manuscripts, Elohim has a cholam. Now what happens when the scribes put the vowels of Elohim on the name? Here we go. Ezekiel 11 verse 7. Lachen, ko amar Adonai Yodewah. Remember, this is not pronounced as Adonai Adonai, because that would be a call for attention. They pronounce this as Adonai Elohim. So there's the shwa of Elohim, there's the chirek. Where is the cholam? The cholam is missing. Now we can answer the question, why is the cholam missing? The cholam is missing because the scribes were very nervous and they didn't want us to know what the name is. And so what they did is they put the true vowels here on the name, the vowels of Yehovah, and they left out the cholam to make sure that no one would even know how to pronounce the name. They're hiding the true pronunciation from us. Is that a good theory? No, obviously not. The scribes are writing dummy vowels on the name, the vowels of Elohim, and they left out their cholam to prevent people from accidentally pronouncing a gibberish name. Now I've seen it happen when people read the Bible and they're concentrating so hard on the vowel points that they don't even realize what they're reading, and they get to the name and they pronounce it as Yehovah or Yehovah. And the scribes wanted to prevent this so that people won't be speaking gibberish while reading the Bible. Let's look at another example. Ezekiel 11 verse 8. Ne'um Adonai Yodewah declares Adonai Yodewah. So again, Yodewah is written next to Adonai. It's a title of respect. It's pronounced as Adonai Elohim, and the cholam of Elohim is missing. So why is it missing? It's very clear to me that the scribes left out this cholam vowel to prevent us from speaking a gibberish name, not to hide the true pronunciation Yehovah from us. And in other words, if the scribes did this with the vowels of Elohim, of course they would do this with the vowels of Adonai. Let's flash through some examples in the Leningrad Codex so you can see that the name is written with the vowels of Elohim repeated times with a missing cholam. Now those two dots there, the two vertical dots, is called Zakef Katon in the Tiberian pointing system. That is not a vowel, it's not a cholam, it's just an accent that tells you to pause on that word. Okay, so the cholam is missing. And again the cholam is missing. And again the cholam is missing with the vowels of Elohim. In other words, they're not hiding the true pronunciation, they're just preventing us from pronouncing a gibberish word. The cholam is missing. The cholam is missing. The cholam is missing. In the Leningrad Codex, the name is written with the vowels of Elohim hundreds of times with a missing cholam. And the reason it's not thousands of times is because this phrase, Adonai Yodewah, only occurs several hundred times in the Hebrew Bible. And so several hundred times they write it without the cholam. If it occurred thousands of times, they would leave out the cholam thousands of times. Alright, now watch out for revia when you're searching for the cholam. So in the Masoretic text, every word must have an accent. The accents either tell you to pause at that word or not to pause at that word. And in chanting, when they chant the Hebrew Bible, it also gives the tone. So every word must have an accent unless it's joined by makef, which then performs the job of an accent basically. So on the name, there's the shwa, there's the chirek. You can see no accent on the name except for that dot. Then you know that dot is a revia, it's not the cholam. So still the cholam is missing. If they wanted to write the cholam there would be two dots, a revia and cholam. Alright, now we're still in group A, the Cairo Codex. And the scribe of the Cairo Codex followed the same approach. So here we have the phrase, Ne'um Adonai Yodewah. There's the shua of Elohim's vowels, there's the chirek, because remember, this is pronounced as Adonai Elohim. So there's the shua of Elohim, there's the chirek, next to it is the stripe called siluk. The cholam is missing. So again, we see in the Cairo Codex of the prophets, numerous examples of how the scribe wrote the vowels of Elohim on the name. He wrote dummy vowels on the name, false vowels on the name, and he left out the cholam to prevent people from speaking a gibberish name. We can see this, it's very factual in the most important Bible manuscripts. Again, there is a revia, which tells you to pause on the word Elohim you're pronouncing there. It's not a cholam. And again, that's revia. So repeated times, the scribes left out the cholam when writing dummy vowels on the name. Alright, there's another example. Now, the Sassoon Codex, part of Group 1, Group A, they followed the same approach. Here we have the phrase Adonai Yodeh-Wah-Hey, and Yodeh-Wah-Hey has Elohim's vowels because it is pronounced as Adonai Elohim. There's the shua, there's the chirek, there is the accent at nach, the cholam is missing. Okay, in this manuscript, the name Yodeh-Wah-Hey with the vowels of Elohim is written repeated times with the cholam missing. Now watch out in the book of Psalms for Revia Mugrash. It's a dual accent. So you might think there's the accent on the Yod, so that's a cholam. No, this is a dual accent called Revia Mugrash, and there should have been another dot there if the name had a cholam on it. Let's look at an example from the Leningrad Codex. There is the word Adonai. That little stripe there is Mugrash. That is a revia, and there is the cholam. So clearly in the previous example, the cholam was missing. So even in the Sassoon Codex, the name is written repeated times with the vowels of Elohim, and the cholam is left out. Okay, why did the scribes leave out this cholam vowel? Here's Nehemiah Gordon to explain.
What I can say for sure is it's over 4,000 times that the cholam is missing, and it's written in a way that's unpronounceable according to the rules of the Hebrew language. And it's quite clear to me that the scribe left out this vowel because he didn't want people to pronounce it. And more specifically, he didn't want people to pronounce it accidentally. Some people perhaps on purpose, but also accidentally. If you'd come across that name, you wouldn't accidentally pronounce it because one of the vowels is left out.
Okay, now I know Nehemiah is talking specifically about the Aleppo Codex, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Why is the cholam missing? I agree with Nehemiah Gordon that the cholam is missing because the scribe didn't want us to pronounce the name the way it's written there. However, did the scribe not want us to pronounce the true name Yehovah, or did he not want us to pronounce the gibberish name Yehovah, which you'd get if you put the vowels of Adonai on the name? And it's clear from these manuscripts that because the scribes left out the cholam with the vowels of Elohim, that he removed that cholam because he didn't want us to pronounce gibberish words, not because he was hiding the true pronunciation of the name from us. We know that when the scribes did not want us to know the true pronunciation of a word, they put dummy vowels on that word. Here's another video clip of Nehemiah Gordon regarding the missing cholam.
But most of these manuscripts, the name is written usually with one of the vowels missing, and then every once in a while, Elohim Inali Ado caused his hand to slip and put in the full vowels. And this consistent mistake, what it reflects is that the scribes knew what the name was. And when they slipped up, they never put in Yehovah, they never put in Yehiva, they never put in Yahava, they always vocalized it as Yehovah.
All right. Now I can understand that this sounds like a convincing argument to people who do not read the Hebrew Bible, do not read the Masoretic text. But we can actually test Nehemiah's argument. And we'll again test this argument using the vowels of Elohim. Now I showed you just now, that usually in the Leningrad Codex, when the name is written next to Adonai, so you have Adonai Yodeh-Wah-Hey, and the name is pronounced as Elohim, the scribes usually left out the cholam. Now there are some places where the scribes slipped up and put in the full vowels Yehovi. Now let's test Nehemiah's argument. Usually it's written with the cholam missing, but every once in a while Elohim caused the scribe's hand to slip and he put in the full vowels Yehovi, and now here we have the Creator's true name Yehovi. So that first dot is the cholam, the second dot is the revia, and here the name is suddenly pronounceable. We can pronounce it because one of the vowels are not missing. And you know what? whenever the scribes slipped up and put in the full vowels, they always vocalized the name as Yehovah. They never vocalized it as Yehuvi or Yehavi or Yehevi. They always vocalized it as Yehovah with a cholam, and that proves the scribes knew the name was Yehovah. Is that a good argument? Is that a very good scholarly argument to prove what the name is? So what is the truth? What's going on here? Why is it a consistent mistake? Why do they never write Yehuvi or Yehavi, but they always write Yehovah with the cholam every time they slipped up? It's because the second vowel of Elohim is a cholam. And what the scribes were doing is they were pronouncing the name here as Elohim. And they tried to leave out the cholam to prevent us from speaking a gibberish name like Yehovah. But because they pronounced it as Elohim, and they knew the second vowel of Elohim is a O, a cholam, when they slipped up, they put in the cholam of Elohim. So the fact that the scribes never wrote Yehuvi or Yehavi or Yehevi proves they put in the vowels of Elohim. Because Elohim is not pronounced as Elohim or Elehim or Elihim. It's always pronounced as Elohim. Now the same is true about the vowels of Adonai. Now anyone reading the Hebrew Bible should know that the second vowel of Adonai is a cholam. Does Nehemiah know this? He should know that. So what the scribes were doing was they pronounced the name as Adonai. Adonai, Adonai. Every time they wrote the name, they said Adonai. And I've shown you some evidence of this in session number 3, I think, where we saw that the scribes would replace the name with the title Adonai with the name Yodeh-Wah-Heh, and they would replace the name Yodeh-Wah-Heh with the title Adonai. And that proves they pronounce it the same way.
Now bear in mind, I have no doubt that the scribes in the Middle Ages read Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh as Adonai. That was the tradition that even Karaites observed. We have that from Karaite sources. There's no question they did that. The question is if they read it Adonai, why didn't they put in the vowels of Adonai?
And so what happened was that every once in a while, the scribe slipped up and he put in the cholam of Adonai on the name. Because Adonai's second vowel is a cholam. It's never Adonai or Adinai or Adenai or Adanai. It's always Adonai. So what Nehemiah uses as proof that the name is Yehovah is actually excellent evidence that the scribes put the vowels of Adonai on the name and the vowels of Elohim on the name, and that is why it's a consistent mistake, because they put the vowels of Adonai and Elohim on the name. Okay, now let's look at the 4445 manuscript. There is the word Adonai, and that is the cholam, that is Erevia. So usually in this manuscript, Adonai is written with a cholam, but when they put the vowels of Adonai on the name, they usually leave out the cholam. So there's the name Yodeh-Wah-Heh, and the cholam is missing. Now, unfortunately, in this manuscript, some of the pages have been lost. And this title, Adonai Yodeh-Wah-Heh, pronounced as Adonai Elohim, has been lost from the original manuscript. So we can't perform the test in this manuscript, but it's still pretty clear that the scribe of this manuscript followed the same practice as we saw in the previous 3 manuscripts, leaving out the cholam of Adonai and Elohim on the name to prevent people from speaking gibberish words that do not exist in Hebrew. Let's sum up what did we learn from Group A of Hebrew Bible manuscripts. The cholam is removed from the name to prevent us from pronouncing gibberish. The vowels of Elohim and Adonai are treated the same way. Let's sum this up in the table. In these manuscripts, Adonai's second vowel is a cholam and Elohim's second vowel is a cholam. But when they put these vowels on the name, they leave out the cholam of Adonai and they leave out the cholam of Elohim to prevent people from speaking gibberish. But every once in a while they slipped up because they were pronouncing this as Adonai and Elohim. They slipped up and put in the cholam of Adonai and the cholam of Elohim, and then the name is written as Yehovah and Yehovah. So what do we learn? We learn that the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Adonai just as much as the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Elohim. Okay, so this was Group A. There are many more such Bible manuscripts that treat the Cholam the same way. We've only looked at several examples today. Now let's move on to Group B, which includes the Aleppo Codex. Why is the Cholam missing on the name in the Aleppo Codex specifically? The Cholam is missing, the Cholam is missing. Why is it missing? We'll start with Nehemiah Gordon and what he teaches about the missing Cholam specifically in the Aleppo Codex, and then we will look at the Aleppo Codex and see whether Nehemiah's arguments are valid or invalid, and whether he has accurately presented the facts to us or not.
And you can see that Yehovah has the vowels Yehovi. It has the vowels of Elohim. It's not the exact vowels of Elohim, right? The Yud doesn't have the Chataf Segel, but the Cholam is there, and the Chirik tells you, read this as Elohim. Now, what's really interesting to me is that when the vowel is a kamatz over 4,000 times, the Cholam is left out. When the name is read as Elohim by tradition, they had no problem putting in the Cholam. The Cholam is usually there, almost always there, as Yehovi. So why would they have no problem writing Yehovi, but they went to great lengths to avoid writing Yehovah with the full vowels and only slipped up 7 times in the Aleppo Codex? Because they knew Yehovi wasn't the name. I haven't sinned by early rabbinical law by saying Yehovi, because that's not the name. They knew that wasn't the true pronunciation of the name. In this period, there'd be no problem in saying Yehovi. And so it was only in Yehovah that they consistently, with 7 exceptions, left out the Cholam. In Yehovi, it was fine.
Okay, let's just sum up what Nehemiah Gordon teaches about this Cholam. He says that when the scribes put the vowels of Elohim on the name, they left in the Cholam because they knew Yehovah is not the name. When they put the vowels of Yehovah, what he claims to be the true vowels of the name, on the name, they left out the Cholam to hide the true pronunciation from us. Okay, now it might sound very convincing, but I want to show you something today that Nehemiah Gordon does not tell you about. So if you just look at this superficially, there is the phrase Adonai Yodevaheh, pronounced as Adonai Elohim. The Cholam is usually there, and when the name has the kametz there, the Cholam is usually missing. So if you just look at this superficially, you might think that Nehemiah Gordon is right. However, there's something big here that Nehemiah Gordon does not tell you about, and that's what I'm going to tell you today. What the scribes did was, they put the vowels of the word they were pronouncing onto the name. Alright, they put the vowels of Elohim and Adonai on the name. Now I want to show you something here in the Aleppo Codex. It's Jeremiah 7 verse 20. Lachen ko amar Adonai Yodevaheh. There's the Hebrew word Adonai. The first vowel is there. The last vowel, the kametz, is there. The Cholam is missing. Aaron ben Asher, who pointed the Aleppo Codex, wrote Adonai without a Cholam. Why? Are these vowels, Shua, Cholam, Kametz, sacred vowels? No, there are many other places in the Aleppo Codex where the scribe wrote the vowel pattern Shua, Cholam, Kametz. Here's the word Adonai or Adonav, his lords. So Adonai is my lord or my lords, Adonai is his lord or his lords. And there's the Shua, Cholam, Kametz, Shua, Cholam, Kametz, Shua, Cholam, Kametz. Here are some other names on the right hand side. Yehoram, Yehoash, and again Yehoash. This scribe had no problem putting in the vowel Shua, Cholam, Kametz. He did not consider them sacred vowels, but he chose, nevertheless, Aaron ben Asher chose to write Adonai, to point Adonai without a Cholam. That is how he pointed it. And even though we might not know the reason, it makes no difference for today's study. The point is, if Adonai is written with the missing Cholam, and then the scribes put the vowels of Adonai on the name, there will be no Cholam. In the Aleppo Codex, Elohim is written with a Cholam. And then when the scribe put the vowels of Elohim on the name, he kept the Cholam in place. So he was not trying to prevent us from pronouncing gibberish names. He probably thought that if you're reading the Hebrew Bible, you should know it's not Yehovah, it's Elohim, what you're supposed to pronounce. And he also did not even do anything with the cholim when he moved it over. He wrote Adonai without a cholim. Therefore, when he wrote the vowels of Adonai in the name, there's no cholim. Now that's the general rule. There are some exceptions. But let's just see here. Elohim is written with a cholim. So when the vowels of Elohim are written on the name, the cholim is there. Adonai is written without a cholim. Therefore, when the vowels of Adonai are placed on the name, there is no cholim to place on the name. Let's go through some examples here in the Aleppo Codex where you can see the word Adonai written repeated times without a cholim. This is how the scribe chose to write it. And does Nehemiah not know this? Does Nehemiah not know that in the Aleppo Codex Adonai is written without a cholim? So in the book of Psalms, remember to watch out for the via mugrash. That is a dual accent. There is no cholim on Adonai there. The cholim is still missing. So, does Nehemiah not know that in the Aleppo Codex Adonai is written without a cholim? Or does he not want you to know it? Nehemiah Gordon often tells the story of how he proofread the book of Ezekiel in the Aleppo Codex. So let's look at the Aleppo Codex. The very pages that Nehemiah says he proofread. And he had to check these photographs against a transcript. And he says he had to check every dot and dash, every little detail, the constants, the vowels, the accent system, and the Masorah. And now I'm going to show you several pages in the Aleppo Codex so you can see repeated times in the book of Ezekiel the word Adonai is written without a cholim. Repeated times, over and over. Let's go through some examples. Most of the pages, in most of these pages, you'll see it repeated times on one page that the word Adonai is written without a cholim. I mean, did Nehemiah Gordon never see this? Well, he proofread this manuscript and had to check every vowel. Did he never see that Adonai is written without a cholim? In the Aleppo Codex, over and over and over, repeated times on almost every page here. Does he not know this? Or is he hiding the information from you? Because this missing cholim Adonai explains to us why there is no cholim on the name. Now, if you keep searching and keep searching and keep searching and keep searching and keep searching, you will finally find the word Adonai written with a cholim. It's very rare. But because the scribe pronounced it as Adonai, when he slipped up and put in the full vowels, he put in the O of Adonai. So let's look at an example. The Aleppo Codex, Psalm 130 verse 6, and there we have the word Adonai. It's Ladonai to Adonai, and there is the cholim. To find the cholim on Adonai in the Aleppo Codex is very rare. It's very difficult to find it. Okay, so what would happen if the scribe put the vowels of Adonai on the name? There would usually be no cholim, but because he pronounced it as Adonai, every once in a while he would slip up and put in the cholim of Adonai. Okay, so in the Aleppo Codex, the cholim is not written Adonai. And when the scribe put the vowels of Adonai and Elohim on the name, he treated them the same way. In other words, Adonai has no cholim, so the vowels of Adonai on the name has no cholim. Elohim has a cholim, so the vowels on the name when pronounced as Elohim has a cholim. Okay, let's look at other manuscripts that are similar to the Aleppo Codex in the way they pointed the word Adonai. So they might not be similar in accuracy or in age, but they are similar in how they pointed the word Adonai. So this is Genesis 15 verse 8. Vayomar Adonai Yodewahei Bama Eda Ki Irashena. Then he said, Adonai Yodewahei, by what or how will I know that I will inherit it or take possession of it? Talking about the promised land. And Abraham uses this title of respect, Adonai Yodewahei, pronounced as Adonai Elohim, and there you can see the word Adonai written without a cholim. So the Aleppo Codex is not the only manuscript in which Adonai is written without a cholim. There are other manuscripts. Now in this manuscript, when the scribes put the vowels of Elohim on the name, they also left out the cholim. So that is a Zakev Katon, the cholim is missing. This explains why in some manuscripts it is extremely rare to find the cholim on the name, and in some manuscripts you'll never find it. It's because Adonai is written without a cholim, and when the scribes put dummy vowels on the name, they leave out one of the vowels to prevent a gibberish name. Two reasons why the cholim is missing, none of which suggest that the vowels shua, cholim, kametz are the vowels of the name. Not at all. Here are three more examples from this manuscript where Adonai is written without a cholim, and the name here with the vowels of Elohim are written without a cholim. So that is a Reviya, and that is a Reviya, and here you can see a different accent, the Atnach, so you can see there's no cholim. Two reasons for the cholim to be missing, both of which prove that these are the vowels of Adonai and Elohim written on the name. Here's another manuscript that is similar to the Aleppo Codex and how it points the word Adonai. Okay, let's start there, and it's Moses speaking. Adonai Yodewahei Ata Hachilota Laharot et Avdecha et Godlecha ve et Yadecha Achazaka. Adonai Yodewahei, you have begun to show your servant your greatness and your mighty hand. And he uses this phrase Adonai Yodewahei, and Adonai is written without a cholam. So what would happen when the scribes put the vowels of Adonai on the name? There's no cholam to move over. They wrote Adonai without a cholam. Here's another example of Adonai without a cholam in this manuscript. And there's the name with Elohim's vowels without a cholam. So here's again two reasons why the cholam will be missing. Final example here, Adonai with no cholam, the vowels of Elohim on the name with no cholam. So let's sum up what we have learned from Group B. In the Aleppo Codex, the vowels on the name are according to the Kari, according to what they read. So when they read the name as Adonai, they put the vowels of Adonai on the name. The only problem is Adonai is written without a cholam, so there's also no cholam on the name. That's the general rule. If you keep searching, you'll find Adonai with a cholam, and you'll also find the cholam on the name, the cholam of Adonai. Okay, in the Aleppo Codex, Elohim has a cholam, and so when the name is pronounced as Elohim, the cholam is moved over onto the name. And then we looked at these other two manuscripts that are similar because they point Adonai without a cholam, but they even delete the cholam of Elohim's vowels. So there are two reasons in those manuscripts why you won't find a cholam on the name. So even in the Aleppo Codex, Nehemiah's favorite manuscript, and of course it's the most accurate Karaite manuscript in the world, so you can understand why, but even in this manuscript there is clear evidence that the scribes put the vowels of Elohim and Adonai on the name. So the vowels Yehovah are the vowels of Adonai just as much as the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Elohim. There's no indication here that the vowels Shua, Cholam, Kametz are special. They're the vowels of Adonai. Alright, now let's move on to Group C. Group C includes the Damascus Crown or the Damascus Pentateuch or the Sassoon 507 manuscript. But there are many similar manuscripts in the world. Now, you might have heard Nehemiah reading this very passage from this very manuscript, and he reads, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, Va'avta et Yehovah Elohecha, and so on. So he pronounces this as Yehovah. Now, of course you can do so if you want to, because there's the Shua, there's the Cholam, and there's the Kametz. So you can pronounce it as Yehovah if you want to. What he doesn't show you in this very manuscript is that when the name is pronounced as Elohim, you also have the full set of vowels. And so here you can see what Moses himself said, Adonai Yehovah. Did Moses pronounce the name as Yehovah? No. These scribes put dummy vowels on the name. And in this manuscript, the scribe did not remove the cholam. When he put the vowels of Adonai on the name, the cholam is there. When he put the vowels of Elohim on the name, the cholam is there. No indication that the name is Yehovah. Everything, all the evidence suggests, I think it actually proves, that these vowels like Yehovah are dummy vowels. Let's look at some more examples. Here you can again see the phrase Adonai Yodewahei pronounced as Adonai Elohim. There is a cholam and there is a revia. So again the cholam is there. You can clearly see the cholam there. It's again with the vowels of Elohim. And here's the final example. This phrase Adonai Yodewahei only occurs 4 times in the Pentateuch, in the Torah. So this is the final example. And again the cholam is there. But now you can clearly see that the later scribe wrote over the original letters with new ink and some of the vowels. Now next to that dot, I hope you can see it, are 2 vertical dots. That's the Zakef Katon. Now I can't prove to you there's an original cholam beneath that new ink, but I think there is, because in the other 3 places we can see how that the original scribe also put in the cholam of Elohim. So in this group of manuscripts, the scribes just put in the vowels of Adonai and Elohim, and they retained the cholam. And if you're going to pronounce the name as Yehovah, it's your own problem. They're not helping you. Some of the other scribes tried to help you not to do that. Let's look at a similar manuscript from the Bodleian Library. You can see the name Yodewahei, and the cholam is usually there. How about the vowels of Elohim? In this manuscript, when the vowels of Elohim are placed on the name, the cholam is also usually there. So there's Yodewahei next to Adonai. So even though it's this way around, they still can't pronounce this as Adonai Adonai. That would be a call for attention. So they pronounce this as Elohim Adonai, actually Le'Elohim Adonai. And the cholam is there. So it's just a different style, a different approach that these scribes followed. So in group C, the cholam is usually not missing. The vowels of Elohim and the vowels of Adonai are treated the same way when written on the name. Let's sum this up in the table. Adonai as a cholam, the vowels of Adonai on the name as a cholam. Elohim as a cholam, the vowels of Elohim on the name as a cholam. So clearly here, even in this group of manuscripts, the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Adonai just as much as the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Elohim. They're treated the same way. No indication that the name is Yehovah. Let's move on to group D. In group D we have the Petersburg Codex, which is written with Babylonian vowel pointing signs. So they look very different, but most of the words are pronounced the same way, and then there are also some differences. But let's read this phrase. Vayira'u ha'anashim yira'a gedola et Yodewahei. Then, so it's then, the men feared Yodewahei with a great fear. So you can see that the order in English is very different from the Hebrew order. But that's what it means. Now on this screenshot you can see the name Yodewahei 3 times, and each time it has a different symbol written above it. And these symbols you see here are accents that tell you to pause or not to pause, depending on their shape, but they're not vowel points. So in the Babylonian tradition, they usually don't place any vowels on the name. Now we'll look at a different class just now, but this class of manuscripts with Babylonian pointings do not have vowels on the name. However, we still know they pronounce the name as Adonai for several reasons. One of the reasons is the vowel and the preposition, which we'll talk about in the next session. The other is that when the name is written next to Adonai, you can't pronounce it as Adonai. That would be changing a title of respect into a call for attention. So, what do we see here? The Jews do not need help to pronounce the name as Adonai. They know that when you see the name Yodewahei, you pronounce it as Adonai. So there are even manuscripts without any pointings in which the name Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh is spelled out. Now usually they change it to 2 or 3 yods, but sometimes it's spelled out without any vowel points because you don't need help to pronounce it as Adonai. When you're supposed to pronounce it as Elohim, you might need some help. So they put the vowels of Elohim on the name here. That is the equivalent of the Tiberian Chatef Segol. That is the equivalent of the Tiberian Cholam. So remember, in Tiberian pointing, that is not a Cholam, that is Zakef Katon, an accent. In the Babylonian pointing, that is the equivalent of a Cholam. 2 different pointing systems, and that is a Chirek. Let's look at the vowels of Elohim in Babylonian pointing. There's the Chatev Segol, Cholam and Chirek, the equivalent at least, and again. So this is what they place on the name next to Adonai. Alright, let's look at a similar manuscript. The Berlin Codex, also written with Babylonian vowel pointing signs and with no vowels on the name. So this is Psalm 94, El, Nikamot, Yodewahei. Now these two symbols on the name are two accents. And you can again see this on the next line on Haaretz. There looks like a little arrow, and that looks like a cross. These are two accent marks. So clearly there's no vowels on the name here. And again, there's a different accent on the name and a different accent on the name. No vowels in this group of manuscripts. Let's sum this up in the table. Group D, manuscripts with Babylonian pointing like the Petersburg Codex and the Berlin Codex, have no vowels on the name when pronounced as Adonai, but they have the vowels of Elohim on the name when thus pronounced, or when it comes next to Adonai. So this is now summed up for you with a Tiberian equivalent, so you can compare these pointings to the other pointings above. When the name is pronounced as Adonai, all the pointings are left out, because you don't need help to pronounce the name as Adonai. When the name is pronounced as Elohim, they help you with dummy vowel points. So again, there's no indication that the scribes put the true vowels on the name. Again, we see that the scribes put dummy vowels on the name. Alright, now let's look at a similar class of manuscripts that do not belong to the 7 important manuscripts, but they're also written with Babylonian vowel signs. Some people might call these Yemenite vowel points. And here's an example on the screen. The name Yodewahei with the equivalent of Shua, Cholam, and Kametz. So Nehemiah Gordon is very excited that even in the Babylonian pointing, he says the name is Yehovah. So let's see what Nehemiah teaches about this. And then I'll again show you something that he doesn't show you.
We now have 3 manuscripts with a Babylonian pointing, which is an alternative dialect of Hebrew, not the standard Hebrew you find in printed Bibles and in most manuscripts. It was used by the Jews of Babylonia and in Yemen, and there it's also Yehovah.
Oriental 1473, that's the designation of the manuscript, or 1473. It has Babylonian pointing, and it has the full vowels Yehovah. And let me show it to the people here. I mean, it's breathtaking that you have this not only in the Tiberian system from Karaites and rabbinical Jews, Ben Asher and Ben Naphtali, you have it in the Babylonian pointing. In other words, this goes back to the ancient tribes of Israel who spoke Hebrew differently with different pronunciations. And both of those dialects of Hebrew preserve God's holy name, the name of the Father, as Yehovah. Now, the Shva looks different, and the Cholam looks different, and the Kamatz looks different. You can see it here on the screen. But that is in Babylonian pointed Hebrew, a manuscript preserved in Yemen, Yehovah.
Okay, now this, again, it sounds very good, it sounds very convincing, and Nehemiah is very excited about this. But I want to show you several things that Nehemiah does not show you. Let's look at this very manuscript that Nehemiah brings. And, okay, so that vowel is the equivalent of any shua. In this manuscript, they don't use composite shuas. So that could represent an a, or just a simple shua, a short air perhaps. So you could pronounce that as that first syllable as yeah, first consonant and vowel as yeah. That is the cholam, that is the kametz, the equivalent at least. So you can pronounce this as Yehovah if you want to. Okay, I don't argue that. But look at the word right next to it. The word right next to the name here is Adonai. Okay, now look at the pointings on Adonai. The first one is a stripe, the equivalent of any shua. That is the equivalent of cholam, and that is the equivalent of kametz. So what happened here? This is supposed to be pronounced as Adonai Elohim, but the scribe slipped up and he wrote Adonai, and then again he wrote in the vowels of Adonai on the name. Can you see these vowels on the name are exactly the same as the vowels on Adonai? They don't even have a composite shua to change into a simple shua. It's exactly the same. I think Nehemiah should have told you that in all these different, even in these 2 different dialects of Hebrew, both in the Ben Naphtali and the Ben Asher and the Berean pointing and in the Babylonian pointing, we find the vowels of Adonai on the name. Okay, let me show you something else here. Usually the scribe did not make this mistake. He usually wrote Adonai Elohim, so that's correct. Adonai would be a call for attention. This is Adonai and then pronounces Elohim. Now let's apply Nehemiah's argumentation here. I've shown you today in the Leningrad Codex, which is a rabbinical manuscript, that the name is Yehovah with the full vowels Shua, Cholam, Chilek. I've shown you in the Aleppo Codex, a Karaite manuscript, that the name is Yehovah with the full vowels Shua, Cholam, Chilek. And now I'm showing you in Babylonian pointing that the name of the Father is preserved for us as Yehovah. What an excellent argument. The truth is that in both these dialects, the Jews pronounced the name as Adonai and Elohim and put the vowels of Adonai and Elohim on the name. So in the previous slide, the vowels of Adonai are placed on the name. Here, the vowels of Elohim are placed on the name. Does this mean the name is Yehovah? No, I don't think so. Even in these Babylonian manuscripts, we can see that the scribes, in some of them they put no vowels on the name, only the vowels of Elohim, and some of them they also put the vowels of Adonai on the name, and the vowels of Elohim. Okay, so this is what we saw today. We saw that in all the important Hebrew Bible manuscripts with Tiberian pointing, the vowels of Elohim and Adonai are treated the same way when placed on the name. In other words, the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Adonai, just as much as the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Elohim. And even in the Babylonian pointing, we saw in these manuscripts, the scribes put the dummy vowels of Elohim on the name. No indication that they put the true vowels on the name. And in that other group of Babylonian or Yemenite manuscripts, they put the vowels of Adonai and the vowels of Elohim on the name. There's no indication here that the vowels Shua, Chol, and Kametz are the vowels of the name. Nehemiah Gordon claims the scribes took out and hid the Cholim to hide the true pronunciation Yehovah. We've seen today the scribes took out the Cholim. They didn't hide it. They just took out the Cholim to prevent us from speaking gibberish names like Yehovah and Yehovah with the vowels of Adonai. Nehemiah Gordon says they had no problem writing Yehovah, but went to great lengths not to write Yehovah. Well, in most manuscripts, that's plainly not the truth. They also left out the Cholim with the vowels of Elohim. In the Aleppo Codex specifically, Adonai doesn't have a Cholim, and therefore there's no Cholim on the name when it takes the vowels of Adonai. Of course, there are those exceptions that we discussed, but that's the general rule. Nehemiah Gordon says because the scribes consistently wrote Yehovah and never wrote Yehovah or Yehiva or Yeheva or Yahava, it proves the scribes knew the name was Yehovah. We tested this argument and found it to be very weak. It's like saying the scribes never wrote Yehuvi or Yehevi or Yahavi or Yehivi. They always wrote Yehovah. And the real cause is because they were pronouncing the name as Elohim and Adonai. And they consistently put in those pointings. To sum up, in most manuscripts, the Cholim vowel is missing to prevent a gibberish name, not to hide the true pronunciation. In the Aleppo Codex, etc., there's no Cholim on Adonai as a general rule, and therefore there's no Cholim on the name as a general rule. And if you keep searching, you will find the Cholim of Adonai on the title Adonai and on the name when pronounced as Adonai. The vowels of Yehovah and Yehovah are treated the same way. So we can conclude that the vowels of Yehovah are the vowels of Adonai just as much as the vowels of Yehovah are those of Elohim. And the vowels on the name in the Babylonian pointing is 100% exactly the same as an Adonai, and they also put the vowels of Elohim on the name. Now, for Nehemiah Gordon to make these claims, is it ignorance or is it dishonesty? Does Nehemiah Gordon not know that the scribes put dummy vowels on the name and left out the Cholim? Does he not know that in most manuscripts they left out the Cholim of the gibberish name Yehovah? Does Nehemiah Gordon not know that in the Aleppo Codex Adonai is written without a cholim after he proofread the book of Ezekiel and saw it numerous times on most of the pages? Does Nehemiah Gordon not know that the second vowel on the word Adonai is a cholim? And therefore, whenever the scribes slipped up, they put in the cholim as the second vowel on the name, because that's the second vowel of Adonai and the second vowel of Elohim. Does Nehemiah not know this? Is he ignorant or is he dishonest? That is the big question. Now you might be wondering about Nehemiah's other arguments, like the B-52 bomber. Nehemiah says the very prepositions prove definitively that the name is Yehovah. So in the next session we'll be looking at this manuscript and at the prepositions to see what they prove definitively. And I want to show you 8 linguistic proofs from the Masoretic text that the vowels on the name are the vowels of Adonai. And it's going to be a 2-part study, and we will see that these Hebrew Bible manuscripts themselves tell us in 8 different ways, in 8 technical ways, they tell us that the vowels on the name are the vowels of Adonai. And then we'll also look at Nehemiah's counter-arguments. Until next time, Shalom and Yeshua Mashiach.